Okay, so we're live.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Good evening, and thanks for joining us for our online planning advisory group meeting. Please bear with us if there are any technical issues. If the meeting has to be altered for any reason, the minutes will be posted on our website as usual. Please be aware this meeting is being recorded and streamed live. Word of warning. All attendees automatically muted unless asked to speak. The normal protocol is for attendees to pose questions and comments through the Q&A board, although I do know tonight we have a couple of presentations, so we'll let that in accordingly. And attendees' names will become visible on the Q&A board if their for the record, if their question is answered. If attendees would like to ask their question directly, we will attempt to enable them to join the meeting via video or just audio if they prefer. But please note this element will then be recorded. Councillors, if you wish to comment or ask a question, please physically raise your hand or use the virtual hand so that I and Hannah and Jane can clearly see you. Similarly, voting councillors, raise your hand so it's recorded when the vote comes. Jane will clerk as normal, and so to help ensure we don't miss any important questions, and attempt to show plans, photos on screen where necessary, and Hannah will take the minutes. Please note, as ever, we're running this meeting as a safe space. We encourage all participants to be respectful of others' opinions and views, and please be warned what you may say may impact on the emotions of others. We know there's a couple of big applications this evening. We don't impose a time limit on people to speak, but we would ask if your points have been made previously, that we don't just repeat point after point, but by all means, if you say my point has been asked and answered, then that's fine. And then that way we can hear from everybody who's attended. So without further ado, item number 1 on the agenda, which questions, comments and information from the public. I think Simon White would like to address this. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Thank you.
Hello, we can hear you.
Lovely, thank you. I won't take much of your time. You considered an application that I put in for development of my double garage on my property last time you met, to turn it into a dwelling. A little bit of context behind that, followed by a question, if that's okay.
Sure.
The context of that is this is a retirement plan for my wife and myself. We have a garage, a double garage, 2-storey, which is 15 metres away from our property and easily accessed, separate from the property. And we would like to turn it into a 1-bedroom property to enable us to move into that and then enable us to let out the large house which we currently live in as part of our retirement plan. So the question is related to the size, because last time you felt that the size of the property proposed was not big enough. We've spent the last few years supporting our children in flats in London and Cardiff, which have been considerably smaller than the property which we're proposing, and we're proposing to live in ourselves. So it's not, inflicting this on other people. It is looking at our future retirement. Also, in the meantime, there is a dearth of affordable rented property in Frome, which you'll be fully aware of. And so that until the point at which we wish to move into it, we would be wanting to let it on the rental market and provide some affordable housing for the area. The question is to do with the size. I've tried to trawl the internet and find out whether Mendip has adopted the minimum housing size standards in the local plan, and I've been unable to find an answer to that online. So that really is my question. That's my context and my question.
Great, thanks, Simon. Jane, do you have any knowledge of whether Mendip have?
Yeah, I mean, so firstly, just to clarify, we didn't actually object outright. It was more a comment, our concern about the size. and Mendip, I don't believe, have adopted space standards, and actually they are only advisory, which was what led us to our reasoning about not objecting, in principle, just raising a concern about the size of the property.
Great.
That's really helpful. Thank you very much. So that's, I haven't been able to contact the planning officer, and I know they're all on other duties. So it's sort of supplementary to that is, what time scale do you think I can expect to hear from the planning officer, or is that a total unknown?
That's a very good question, and I can honestly say I don't know. But you are right. They are, some of them have been redeployed to deal with helping with the vaccinations and other COVID-related matters. They have put out a note just to explain that to ourselves, and I believe the wider public as well. But I honestly don't know. Is the answer.
Okay, fine. I think that's answered all my questions, and I've been able to make my point. So thanks very much for your time.
Great. Thank you very much, Simon. Thank you. Thanks for attending. Are there any other comments or information from members of the public? Obviously not relating to items that we're going to be discussing later. No. Any questions or comments from councillors? No. Excellent. Right. Item number 2 on the agenda. Apologies for absence or any members' declaration of members' interest. Sorry, tongue-tied there. I think we've got apologies for absence from Anita Collier. So if we could mark that. And Paul, did you need to?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. I need to declare an interest on 2 of the applications actually we've got this week. Number 483. I need to declare an interest because the applicant is my next door neighbour. And 484 is one of my applications.
Right. Great. Thanks for that, Paul. Thanks very much. Any other declarations from the councillors? No. Great. Item number 3, to agree the minutes of the meeting held, and I've lost, where was it? 27th of January, which everybody was sent. So has anybody got any questions or queries on those? No. Excellent. If I could ask someone to propose them then. Thanks, Rich. Someone to second. Thanks, John. And all those in agreement. Thank you very much. Thanks, Hannah. And item number 4, to consider the major planning applications received. So I'll pass over to Jane, who will introduce what's going to happen next.
Thank you. So the first 3 applications that we're going to discuss, whilst they are all separate applications, they are part of a master plan. So I'll just go through the description and location at this stage. So firstly, we have land at Little Keeford Lane to the Mount Blatch Bridge. And this application is on behalf of Barrett David Wilson. And this is an outline planning permission for residential development with associated parking, open space and infrastructure, with all matters reserved except access. And we are actually going to be considering the revised plans that were received in January. We also then have land south of the Mount Froome, which again is an application by Barrett David Wilson. This is a full planning permission for residential development together with associated infrastructure, including landscaping, open space, drainage, and revised highway access with a revised master plan as revised by plans received in December 2020. And then the third application is land described as land at Little Keeford Lane, and that is on behalf of Wayne Homes. That is a full application for the erection of 70 dwellings, again with a revised master plan, open space, ecological mitigation, drainage, landscaping and vehicular access, and the revised plans that we're considering were submitted in December 2020. So as I've said previously, when we've considered these applications, we've looked at them on the basis of them being master planned, because that is what was requested by the planning inspector as part of the local plan process. And our response, I'll just say this in short, previously was that our main concerns were that we didn't feel that a master planned approach had been taken. We were very concerned about the access, particularly coming off of Little Keyford Lane, the impacts on ecology, and the sustainability measures. And we also asked that the 3 applications went before a design review panel. So hopefully that's enough from me on those, unless anybody's got any immediate questions. Nope. You're on mute, Steve.
Sorry. So I think firstly, we're going to have a presentation from a representative from David Wilson Homes. I'm not sure who's giving that presentation.
Yes, sorry, if we could make Tim Blythe, Cecilia Hughes and Colin Danks, if we could bring them over to panelists, please. Okay, so
who was the third one, Jane? Sorry, it looks like.
Hello.
Are you both on the same?
We've got 2 Collins on the screen.
2 Colin.
I was just thrown out of the meeting, but I've come back in again.
Okay.
Right.
For some reason, when you clicked over it, it pushed me out.
And Tim Blythe, please, Hannah.
It will just be me speaking, if that's helpful.
Can we see you?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and I'll start my video. And I'm hoping to share a screen as well. That should have started the video. Hello, everyone.
Hello, Colin. Thank you. Thanks for turning up.
Okay.
Hannah, can you allow Colin to share his screen?
Yeah, I think I've got the facility now.
Great.
Shall I just introduce who I am?
Yes, please.
And then I'll try and be brief. I know you've got quite a lot to get through this evening. So I'm Colin Danks. I work for a company called Copperfield. I'm a planning consultant. However, I used to also work for Stantec. So hopefully members will have received a letter from Stantec outlining a number of points that was sent yesterday. What I was proposing to do is, rather than go through all of the letters, just identify some of the things, how we've responded to the issues that were previously raised. I would just also like to pick up, I think Jane identified that you were going to consider plans from December. There was actually, for the Mount application, there were plans in January, which, whilst they are principally the same, there are lots of little detail references, including a number of houses less in the latest plan. Yeah. But anyway, let me share the screen, and I'll hopefully see if I can make that. Host disable attendee screen sharing. I can't share my screen. If somebody could allow me to.
Just made you co-host, so hopefully it should give you the option now.
Right, I'll share my entire screen then. So everyone's going to see themselves for a moment, and then hopefully, can you now see a plan? Has a plan come up on your screens?
Yes, yes, it has.
Wonderful, wonderful. The technology is working. Right, it was just to give a little bit of context, so I'm not going to share lots of slides. I think you've had enough information in the planning application, but it was to explain, you have got, can you see my cursor moving around here steadily?
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
So this application here is for the Wayne Home site. This one here, which was the first one that was referred to, is in outline, and this is the David Wilson scheme between Little Keyford Lane and the Mount. So the detail you see on here, we're not applying for that, but for master plan purposes, we've shown some detail. And this one here is land south of Keyford, land at the Mount, and is in full. So the detail that you've been provided is obviously all the housing detail in there and the detail of the layout. So picking up on the master plan part first, you can see obviously this is the master plan, and there was a master plan document with quite a lot of detail submitted. We spent time before the original submission and since that a further 12 months developing the master plan with all of the parties involved in it, including Wayne Home. So it's been submitted with all 3 applications. We also have, if you have seen it, there's a full ecology master plan as well, which addresses all 3 sites. So there's comprehensiveness in terms of infrastructure, sort of layout and structure, and ecology. If I just run through some of the things that are now materially different between the applications, and if I start with the outline one first, because that's probably the easiest. The biggest change for us is the access arrangements. So you'll see here, there is no vehicular access onto Little Keyford Lane, which was what we were proposing previously. And we've taken a considerable amount of time to look at lots of different access options onto the Mount. So what David Wilson proposes is an access onto the Mount, but to include pedestrian access through the site, and obviously up to the school to the north, and access across into the Wayne scheme, but that will be pedestrian access and cycle access. So just to reaffirm, we're not putting any cars from the David Wilson scheme onto the Mount, onto Little Keyford Lane, sorry. In terms of the what I would call the Mount application, again, we've revised the access. Originally, it was coming out from Dragonfly Close. It's now a brand new access a long way to the south. And this creates here a staggered junction arrangement. And I'll come on to the roundabout point in a moment. The only access we have from Dragonfly Close is this small number of houses here, which I think off the top of my head is about 5 houses. And that was just to give some context to the entrance here and to really start to address that in urban design terms. So coming down to this access point here, it's a staggered arrangement. And the reason it was a staggered arrangement was to prioritise pedestrian connectivity. When we looked at, lots of different options here, T-junctions, staggered junction arrangements, and a roundabout. The issue with the roundabout is, as you can imagine, it's a main road, and any size of roundabout would have to get Pantechnic and trucks through it. So it's got to be a large roundabout. The impact of that, as you can imagine, if anyone tries to cross a roundabout being a pedestrian, it's quite difficult. And as a cyclist, they're less than ideal as well. So we, for that as a starting point, we decided to look at alternative options, which would allow us to create a safe crossing point here, which is convenient for all 3 applications, and would also then give us a safe route all the way up to the school. The second reason we decided to choose a staggered junction was because of the impact on the landscape, the ecology, and the infrastructure required to deliver the roundabout. Basically, the levels in here would mean you'd have to do a lot of engineering works, which in this day and age, if we can all avoid engineering works, that's good for our environment. We would have had to have had a much bigger land take, which would then take out a lot more ecology. It would mean we couldn't put hedgerows in here, and have hedgerows here as well. And from a landscape visual entrance to Froome, again, you'll be faced with a big piece of engineering works, whereas actually here we can do something quite a bit more special, shall we say, for Froome. And we can start to address this in a little bit more detail, a little bit softer way. We have been through, I'm sorry, bear with me because I'm focusing on the access because I think it's obviously been quite an important issue for everybody. We've been through quite a consultation process with Somerset County, and whilst this access and the original access were entirely technically appropriate, as I say, we've listened and we've altered to an alternative technically appropriate access proposal. It does also involve reducing the speed limit and moving the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit out further down here. So again, it's about trying to slow traffic down, face onto it and show that you're entering through and give a what I would call a proper gateway to a designed urban design gateway as opposed to an engineered gateway to Froome. So I won't talk any more about the access unless perhaps you have questions afterwards. Something else that was mentioned was ecology. Now, ecology has been at the heart of this application, and actually we spent a lot of time on site understanding the hedgerows, understanding the impact on the MELS SAC. It is a habitats regulations based application. So we need to prove that we don't have an impact on the MELS SAC and the back corridors. And we need to also demonstrate that we've got a net biodiversity gain. To give you a very quick summary, on the Little Keyford application, the net, bearing in mind that the government asked for 10% improvement on net biodiversity gain, we're at 30% for habitat. And on the Mount, we are at 9% for habitat and 18% for linear habitat, bearing in mind the linear habitat is the important part for the bats. We've got a full lighting scheme for this site to prove that we've got dark corridors for the bats and that the habitats are appropriate. We haven't got a lighting scheme for this scheme because it's in outline. And actually that's one of the questions that's been raised by Natural England. And we'll go back to them and say, well, we'll accept a condition which creates the necessary dark corridors that we need. And of course, then when you design up a scheme, we know that it can deliver a dark corridor, and we know that that reserve matter when it's made will be obviously determined by Mendip and yourselves. So there's an opportunity to check and confirm that is going to happen. Another thing that was mentioned was public open space in some of the consultee responses. There's, there seems to be too much development. Well, two things have happened. Obviously, this is an outline, so we've not defined the number of houses in detail. But on this site, 40% of the site is green. That excludes gardens. So when you include gardens, it's obviously an awful lot more. So when I say 40%, I simply mean the edges here and all the open space, of which a large part of that is wildlife space. Again, it's the same on this side, 40% out of the entire site is green. And we've got lots of wildlife opportunities here, including our sustainable urban drainage has been designed in a way that it gives a net biodiversity gain, so a lot less engineered in its approach. We have looked, and this is why I was just asking about the plans. We've reduced the number of houses on this site. So originally it started at 135. We dropped to just below 130. We're now at 118. Principally, that's to create larger gardens. It's not something that's necessary. We exceeded all the standards already, but it's something we felt would create a better layout. So there's 118 dwellings now on this site. Just a couple more things then on the sustainability side. David Wilson Homes operate a fabric first approach, which is really about not needing to generate energy and using the fabric of the buildings the wall structures, the roof structures, to reduce that energy demand. So they are responding in excess of building regulations. The other thing that's done is they also are compliant with Building for Life standard, and I don't propose to go through that. If you'd like to, I'm sure you're either familiar or have a look online. It's a national standard. My final comment then is just to say, I think there's been some confusion out there. We are not part of Selwood Garden Village. The proposals here are in line with the emerging local plan. Significant weight can be attached to the emerging local plan because the inspector, whilst the examination is still going on, this part of the examination was found sound in the latest inspector's letter. So we can move forward at least with confidence. And I think that's the one thing I'd just like to end on. We, as part of the David Wilson Homes, this site has been around for quite some time. Rather than make a speculative application, we were very careful to wait for that local plan to proceed to a point where we knew what we were doing. We knew it was a comprehensive approach. And obviously we've worked with Mendip and their expectations. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Hopefully that stops sharing. Come back to everybody. Chair, thank you very much for the time and the opportunity to speak. And if you've got any questions, I'd be more than happy to try and help.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Colin. Thanks for that. I see two councillors have got questions. I take the two questions now, and I think then we have our friends of Little Keith who would like to also give their views. So I'll go to Anne first and then Paul, and then we'll go to Friends of Little Keithford, if that's okay.
Thank you, Colin. As we're dealing with access tonight, I wonder if you could comment about access for pedestrians and cyclists.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that, as I said from the start, the whole point of the way the layout is structured is to accommodate cyclists and pedestrians. So there are cycle routes through the scheme. I've dropped down the plan now. I mean, I could put it up if you'd like.
Well, more about access to the scheme from Frome or to Frome. I can't see how it would be safe for a pedestrian to walk to either site, either the Little Keithford one or the Mount site. Just to give you some context, Colin, I live just at the north of your plan, so I know the area extremely well.
Okay. Is your issue in relation to, so for example, access to the school?
Lack of pavements or cycle routes is my issue.
So cycle routes is something that we're led by Somerset County Council on, particularly as they're off-site, they're on their roads. So as and when they expect us to help with the delivery of cycle routes, if they felt that was important, then that's something we'd have to talk to them about. So the cycle route's slightly different. The pavements side, the Mount, we are not proposing to route people up and down the Mount. And that's why within the sites, you've got good crossing points to come up to Dragonfly Close, through Dragonfly Close, and then on to...
perhaps you could bring the plan up again, because there is a particular path that I assume you're proposing pedestrians would use. At the moment, it's a muddy track, so it's people do walk along the Mount. You might not be wanting to route people along the Mount, but people do walk along the Mount, and there are no pavements.
Yeah, and I think and the choice. Let me share my. Hopefully, I'm sharing my screen again. Can you see the plan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I hear what you're saying about the Mount. As I said, our opportunity is anything from here to here. We are proposing works along here. But I think when you're looking at different walking opportunities, there's a route through. Oops, excuse me. I'm moving the mouse. So there's a route through here, but there's
Yeah, and
also this
that's
route.
the muddy track. That is the one with the arrowhead that you've just pointed to. It's not a footpath, it's a muddy track.
And sometimes in the summertime when tracks are a little drier, and people do enjoy using those. I'm not saying that needs to be a primary route during winter. That is one opportunity, and I say then the other opportunity is through here and through there, and obviously all of that is.
Are you saying that a mother with a buggy taking her child to the nursery school that's next to Christchurch School would go along that muddy track? Is
Not
that
along
what you're
that
suggesting?
track, no. So you would go through Dragonfly Close, and then through here.
And to get to the co-op, you go through Dragonfly Close, and because it doesn't happen, that just doesn't happen. That's not the desire line. People will walk down the mount, and there are no pavements.
Well, as I said, I think from our point of view, you have to understand that we engaged in a local plan process. The site was allocated, so this was chosen to be the right location for development. We spent a year discussing it with Somerset County. Somerset County have guided us on what they expect from the development. They've seen this master plan. This master plan has been with them for a long time. I think the difficulty is to solve all problems for all people. There's some things you can do as part of development. There's some things you can't do as part of development. So if we move on to this side, this has been talked about, and I've seen in all the representations. Well, it's a lovely lane. People like to walk on it. It's a great route. We don't want to see cars on it, so we stop the access onto it. So hopefully, from our point of view, by not having cars on here, that it does form yet another alternative route. There's a crossing point in here, and that crossing point will be a dedicated crossing point for pedestrians. So again, I appreciate that's the long way round, but there is a route through should that be needed. And I think we can solve as much as we're able to solve. I think we've tried to achieve that.
Okay. Thanks for that, Colin. Thanks, Anne. Paul, do you want to ask your question now, or do you want to wait until after the Friends of Little Keithwood have done their presentation?
I'm happy to wait if that works for you. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that, Paul. I'm not sure if Joe or Lawrence or both are doing the presentation. Hannah, if you could hello Lawrence, hello Joe.
Hi Chair, thanks Hannah.
Hello Joe.
Yeah, it's just me.
Okay.
It's just me. Thanks for giving me the time to talk tonight as well. I appreciate
no problem.
You've got a lot to get through, so I'll try and keep things a bit brief. And just to introduce me,
Can we see you?
Can you see me? Yeah, I'm not here. How do I turn myself?
John likes to see people. I've come to.
Yeah, no, I appreciate. I don't.
I've just promoted you to panelist, so you should be able to put your camera on now.
Perfect.
Right.
There I am. Beard and all. Yeah, sorry about that. I'm Joe Hannah-Maggs. I'm here on behalf of Friends of Little Keithwood. We tend to refer to ourselves as folk, although that does make us seem like hobbits, so I'll try and avoid that maybe. And what we just wanted to talk tonight because we recognise that whilst Froome is just a consultee in this process, and we wish they had much more power over this whole process, Froome Town Councils and particularly Planning Board, your opinion carries much more weight than a small community organisation like ours. We can obviously sort of fairly active in understanding what the implications of developments are in this particular area. Most of us live here or have a sort of an interest in the area. And one thing I wanted to say tonight is that I know we've been talking a lot, and the planning process kind of dictates that, you know, people like ourselves submit an objection to these sort of plans. But tonight I'm asking on behalf of Friends of Little Keyford that the council not simply object if it feels minded to, but firmly rejects these applications. And there are 10 reasons why, and I'll try and go through them really briefly so I don't keep here too long. The first one is that we don't believe that FR3A has been master planned. Colin's presentation constantly referred to the David Wilson part of the development, not the development. I think that tells its own story. The developers, readily admit that the Wayne Homes section is separate from the other two sites, either side of the B3092. As we also saw in the presentation, even small details, like Anne was just talking about, linking to local amenities, haven't been brought into these plans. So that's not a master plan. That's not a consideration. It's a loose, collection of schemes. We also don't believe that the local plan part 1 and the emerging local plan have really been adhered to here. And importantly, the planning inspector that was looking at the local plan part 2 had specifically called for a master planned approach, and we believe that that's been woefully neglected. The second point that I just wanted to make was about the access. We spent a bit of time hearing from Colin about the access, and I don't think the access issues have really been addressed. Instead of separate entrances, all access should be off of the B3092 to each of the 3 sites, and appreciate that some of them are. This scheme does need a roundabout though, and whilst the developers' presentations about the negative impact on ecology, like not being able to put in new hedgerows, kind of seem to, they're pretty laughable considering the number of hedgerows that are actually being ripped out to allow this development to go ahead. And also, if you want to reference roundabouts, just take a look at the one by Sainsbury's, which seems to adequately deal with some pretty big trucks and also provide safe access across the various roads, and is not, is not too big, I don't think. The presentation before also referenced highways, and one of the statutory consultees to this whole process is Highways England, who have raised an issue about the knock-on effect on traffic as far away as the Beckington or White Row roundabout. They've requested a 3-month pause to be able to assess that traffic impact. So you can only imagine if they're concerned about it that far away on the other side of Frome, or halfway round the bypass on Frome, imagine what the impact is going to be locally. Particularly if you consider that a lot of these cars, a lot of the families who might live here will need to traverse town to get to the secondary school along already congested roads and contribute to air pollution there as well. We also feel that another kind of planning term, cumulative impacts, has not been addressed, because it's not just these 200 or so homes being built across these 3 separate sites. There's also the 350 that are kind of likely to go ahead on Sandys Hill Lane, which basically takes it into the threshold of requiring an environmental impact assessment. And whilst it is welcome that Barratt David Wilson have kind of designed around increasing biodiversity in their own 2 sites, there's no mention of what Wayne Homes are doing. So what is the overall impact? Speaking of ecology, Mendip's own ecologist has suggested there's evidence of a new, previously unknown roost for greater horseshoe bats, which are protected. And Colin again referenced the Mel's SAC bat corridor. This has now changed, and there needs to be some work done to find out where the bats are now roosting. According to Lawrence, there was a fire at the original Mel's site, and no one really knows whether they've moved to Great Elm, Vallis Vale, or somewhere else. But they certainly seem to be a lot closer than was originally thought, and that needs to be looked at before these proposals should proceed. There's also the issue of the loss of land here. This might seem like a sort of big sort of a bigger concept, and you're kind of looking at, you know, sort of a place like Somerset and Mendip and even Frome surrounded by green fields. But the way that those fields are graded, they have different agricultural significance, and these particular ones just so happen to be grade 3A in which is best and most versatile land, and that's protected, or certainly provisions must be made under the National Planning Policy Framework. The whole of this site is categorised in that level, that grade, and there's no mitigation for that. So even with the odd hedgerow here and there, you're not actually doing anything to mitigate the loss of highly productive soil, which could be used and could be necessary for future generations. Also, just talking of the kind of bigger concepts, we've also had a climate emergency declared by Frome Town Council, by Mendip Council, and by Somerset. And a fabric-first approach to building houses does not go far enough, especially when you compare you know, what is likely to end up here. If you look at some of the reference points, for example, Dragonfly Close, built by the same developer, in the context of Barratt, the parent company's own Hannam Hall development, which is very sort of future-proofed and sustainable. We need to protect the climate emergency from developers that claim that just, you know, insulation and energy efficient appliances are reasonable measures to sort of protect our future. They're not. Also, Colin referenced the overwhelming sort of public objection to these plans and had made some measures to try and mitigate those. But it's important that we look at where those objections still stand. I mean, I believe there's in the region of 80 against, or 80 objections for each of these individual sites, which in itself is frustrating for local people who have issues. They're having to do this 3 times just to meet the planning process. If those views are ignored, then it sets a dangerous precedent for what might come later for Frome. And also, we'd like to raise the question of, like, where is the active involvement of our elected officials who, you know, should have one eye on future elections, like our Mendip councillors who themselves voted for a climate emergency. 2 more points and then I'm done, I promise. The National Planning Policy Framework supports the value of local distinctiveness. And as I just mentioned, if the reference point for Barratt David Wilson is their own development at Dragonfly Close and not the typical type of housing that you get either on this side of Frome or in the local area, then there's a major concern that the look and feel of Frome as a whole is going to change at a developer's behest rather than a heritage angle. And finally, going back to, I think, one of the first points that Colin made, you know, the developers have had over a year to address statutory consultee concerns, meet with local people, and mitigate public concerns completely by adequately master planning this site. They've done none of those things. We sat down with the developers 18 months ago and voiced our concerns, and we've not heard anything from them since. It's hardly community consultation. If development must go ahead, then at least let it be appropriate applications. These are not, and so they should be rejected outright. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for that, Joe. Thanks for your comments. I'm going to go on to Paul now, because I know Paul wanted to say something. So I'll go on to Paul.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Steve. I mean, Joe's covered a lot of it there. I mean, I really only had a few kind of direct questions really for Colin regards access. Maybe just to keep things short, I'll just ask a couple of them actually. That we're pleased that you're accessing your site, which is for outline at the moment, off the B road, off the mount, instead of Little Keeford Lane. That's a positive, but it's very unclear if this has been master planned why there isn't a vehicle connection between your David Wilson site and the Wayne Home site, where it's just pedestrian. That kind of seems to be a really obvious thing to do, unless of course you're not talking to each other. So that's one point, one question. The other one is the staggered junction idea, which is interesting, that you're prioritizing pedestrians and cyclists there. The question really is there actually a pedestrian crossing, with lights or something like that on that junction or those two junctions, in order to prioritize pedestrians and cyclists? And also just I mean, as Anne was talking about, these kind of these routes into Culverhay, we accept that they're not necessarily on your site, but all these sites probably coming together and master planning the whole area, maybe should be making some sort of contribution to improve that access. And also, I noticed that actually going back to that junction, I'm not quite sure. You're thinking of say school children coming from the site on the west side. They're going to come across that junction, and their desire line is going to be to turn left towards Dragonfly Close rather than turn right and go through that part of your site. Are you providing that access directly into Dragonfly Close from the junction on the main road? And also there is a possibility I can see on the very northeast part of your site where you could be there could be a direct access, pedestrian access through into Dragonfly Close there, which would be a really nice, quick, short link towards the school as well. And again, it would be a desire line. So just a few things really. I mean, there's loads more, but we'll be here all night if we go into all of them. Perhaps you can answer those. Thanks.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
I don't know if you want to come back on any of those points. Obviously, we don't want to be here to the early hours, but if you want to respond, please do. So
I'll try and be quick. And actually, I'd just like to make one point on the Highways England, because I think that's something I didn't reference. Let me just share my screen again, because as I say, I think it's probably quicker. Hopefully, again, you can see that. So as I think I understood it, without going through all of them, the crossing point here. So there would be a refused crossing point, i.e., there's a widening of the mount here through here, which would create then effectively a central reservation, but it wouldn't be traffic lit. There. If you look at the standards and the 30-mile-an-hour road change in speed, there's not a technical need to have traffic lights. So the county would tell us what we're doing meets their standard. And actually, it's something called Manual for Streets 2 compliant. Again, I'm sure some of you are familiar with that. In terms of the design line of the connections here, yes, there's absolutely connections through here. We do see the green space as a desire line. I mean, it's always nice to walk in, in what is a substantial amount of green space. So there are connections through there. You can see underneath here, there are dotted orange lines. These are expected to be connections which are offline of the mount. So in effect, you can get all the way from the little crossing and the cut through here into the Wayne scheme down, and then run all the way, my cursor's moving in there, run all the way down and through into the site and into both sides, past the crossing points. So actually, when it comes to connectivity, and even if you want to get over from Sandy Hill, isn't it, over here, there'd be an opportunity to get all the way through, walk all the way up there, through there, or up and through into the school if you were to use that way. So actually, and that was slightly disappointing to hear. There's a criticism of not focusing as much on walking and cycling, when actually there's an awful lot of connectivity across both sites. Can I just come back to the point about Highways England, another objection, because I think it's worth explaining. So Highways England objecting not because of this site, but because of all the development in Frome. All of the development in Frome and those junctions at the moment operate at or over capacity. So I sat for the best part of a day with Highways England and all the other people who are proposing things in Frome, and we developed a policy around that, which is why you've got a formal response taking place. So there's been modelling work done on those junctions. That's been all debated and agreed, and it takes a long time with Highways England, but there's been an awful lot of cumulative work, including Wayne and led by ourselves and Wayne, to come up with a solution. Now, those applications won't go or won't be determined until such time as that is resolved to Highway England's satisfaction. So cumulative, we have looked at that. I'll stop there, Chair, because I think otherwise it's probably gone for a long time responding.
Stop sharing your screen as well, because there's a
of course, yeah.
very large picture of me, which is not nice for anyone.
Apologies. Yes.
Thanks. Thanks. I've got Richard and then Mark.
Hi, Colin. Can I just quickly ask about the attenuation ponds to the south of the mount? Because when we last spoke last year, whenever it was, they were outside the permitted development area. Has that been resolved with Mendip?
Yeah, so they do still sit outside, but there's a reason they sit outside. First of all, they're the right place for ponds to go. You need ponds where they're going to operate properly, and where, in this case, they're going to create a form of wetland. When we looked at the, and bearing in mind they're not development, when we looked at the ecology master plan, which there is a comprehensive ecology master plan across all of the sites, we were guided by that as to where the ponds should go, because we get the best net biodiversity gain from it. So that's why they are where they are. They could have been brought in the site, but it would be the wrong thing to do from an ecology perspective.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Colin, for that. It's interesting to hear that Highways England think that Frome is getting overdeveloped to the fact that we can't take any more traffic, and this will only add to it. But with regard to highways, have you actually had a meeting on site with Somerset County Council Highways?
They have been on site. Because of the COVID pandemic, it was a little difficult for us to go with them. So they went on site with Mendip. So they, John Fellingham has been on site, visited, looked at all the different options. We then had video conference calls and telephone calls with him and email exchanges. So as best as we could do with the pandemic, they have, and we've seen the results of that.
Okay, that's interesting. And the other thing is the dirt track that Anne points out, which would be difficult to access in times of bad weather, which you see as a route through to the mount. Would you be prepared to cover that, tarmac that, metal it in some way?
I could take a client instruction on that. I mean, if there's a possibility, I don't think that would necessarily be unachievable, but we'd obviously have to just discuss that with county highways and check obviously land ownership as well. I mean, that's something I can take away from the meeting if that's helpful.
Well, it's not for me to say what the meeting would suggest, but it seems to me that that'd be quite a good quick win for goodwill on your behalf to at least a route that you're suggesting that would be able to be used all year round. But thank you for that.
Okay, I'll take that away. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, God. I think Martin Dimmery, Councillor Martin Dimmery, who's one of the attendees, would like to join. So, Hannah, if you can, Martin, if you can hear us.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks so much, Steve. You can hear me now, I think.
Yeah, we can. Thank you.
Yeah, this is obviously on my patch, and I know I've talked with Anne about the access difficulties. Particularly, what I would say is I'm very pleased there's no longer an access from Little Keyford Lane. That was a major bone of contention, environmentally and in terms of safety. I think the developer has gone some way towards trying to resolve some of the issues. I thought, and I thank Colin for that. I think he made a very good presentation. The folk group and their representative made a very good speech, I thought, on on the reasons for not going ahead with the development. But unfortunately, until there's government legislation to ensure that all housing and all developers meet strict environmental standards when they build houses, it will not be a reason for turning it down on the part of either the town council or the district. I'm afraid. But certainly there's an access issue which I'd like to see the developers sit down with the town and the district to try to resolve. It's clearly not yet resolved. The other thing I would like to say is that as a county councillor, this is the first I've seen of these revised plans. I moan about this a lot, but we don't get to see new developments, even though roads are involved, and we don't get consulted. It's just the highways officers who actually make these decisions on our behalf. And unfortunately, it's sometimes those of us on the county council that clear up the mess afterwards. So I would like to suggest all sides get together and try and resolve this road access issue, because I think, to me, it's the crucial bone of contention. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks for that, Martin. Thanks very much. Any other councillors got any comments? Lizzie? I've got Lizzie.
I've been told that my thing is not a planning thing, as Martin has just sort of said. So I'm going to talk about perhaps climate and energy efficiency and renewable energy as a moral/commercial decision that the developers are making, and a choice. And really just to re-emphasize very briefly what Joe said about the lack of attention that's been given to the energy performance of these buildings. The proposals in the resource efficiency statement suggest a 4% reduction on carbon emissions from these homes on average compared to building regulations. You go, oh, 4%, well done. The future home standard that the government's currently consulting on is looking at a 75 to 80% reduction in carbon emissions from new homes. Okay, so 4% doesn't cut it. That's a choice that Barratt David Wilson are making. They've made the choice to go way beyond a 4% reduction in other developments. They were building homes in 2016 which have better environmental performance than what's in these plans. So, you know, work harder, make good choices, think about renewable energy, please. Do more. That's it. It may not be a planning thing, but it's a choice.
Thanks, Lizzie. Thanks for that. Any other councillors got anything? No. In which case, I'd like to make a few points actually to Colin. Jane, have you got that slide that Nikki produced?
I have.
Because I think it relates a lot to what Lizzie has just said.
I will attempt to share it, but it may involve me unplugging screens. So talk while I do it.
Chair, could I just address the bats issue that was raised? Because I think that's quite an important point.
Yes, please do, Colin, while we're waiting. Yeah.
It's just to understand that from the bats' point of view, wherever they are, our assessment has confirmed there are bats flying around that area. So where they start from our point of view, is not immaterial, but it doesn't change, and it would never change the scheme. The mitigation assumes there are those bats on that site and they're all flying there, because that's what's been shown to happen. So I just wanted to say, I know that's been an issue raised, and just to reassure on that. That doesn't change, wouldn't change our scheme.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that.
I've got it now.
Great, thanks, Jane. I just would go back to the sustainability. This is we have a new sustainability officer, Nikki Brain, who's done a little bit of work for us, and I think this is what Lizzie was trying to say, or what she did say very eloquently. But the current government sort of baseline, if we just take external walls, is 0.3. The developers' target is 0.2. In 2021, interim legislation will be coming in, which will reduce this to 0.18, and the future home standard is even lower at 0.15. So I think the issue I've got is even before a brick is laid, the houses and this fabric first concept is going to be out of date. And as Lizzie pointed out, I mean we've seen the Hallam Hall development, which is excellent. And why can't you do something like this with these sort of with those sort of numbers in Frome? Because we think the developments should look forward. There's a lifespan of, I would guess, of between 60 to 75 years minimum for these houses, and to build them at a target which is going to be obsolete within the space of a few months, I just don't think is right. And it's from a moral, from a benefit of Frome perspective, and the same goes for gas boilers. I mean, the government are planning to withdraw gas boilers, banning them from new homes from 2025. So again, within probably 2-3 years of these houses being built, the gas boilers will be obsolete and be phased out, and you're effectively putting the cost of that onto the homeowners when quite frankly Barratt Homes earns enough money. They should be able to they should be able to build homes which are future proofed as far as I'm concerned.
Would you like me to respond? Yeah. I hear what you're saying. I've spent all day on an EIP talking about climate change, so I do understand what we've got at the moment is an evolving system, and that system is moving from part way towards effectively carbon neutral to eventually being carbon neutral. I think the development industry as a whole is a little bit like a super tanker. It does take time to change. It takes time to procure certain products. I'm not saying it can't be done, and you've referenced Hallam Hall. Hallam Hall is slightly unique. Hallam Hall was, as a site, was actually heavily funded by Homes England at the time. And that was to try and experiment on technologies to see what was possible and what wasn't. That's why, and Barratt's put their hand up and said, we'll do that. There isn't Homes England funding here in the same way. And as I say, as you go through that transition, now you develop over time. The building regs point though, you talk about 2021 building regs. Again, I'm not a building regs person, but I suspect that this will need to be registered under 2021 building regs in any event. So it will be at least compliant with those. And in terms of trying to achieve the right form of development, it's doing as much as it can at this point in time with the technologies, with the expectations of the local plan. And as we move through the process, there will be greater and more sustainable developments in time. But it is actually much more of a challenge than I think most people recognise within the development industry. I can give you some indications of the likely costs of doing it because it's not an insubstantial amount. It seems easy to just take a gas boiler out and stick an air source heat pump on, but it materially changes the cost of delivering a house, and that cost has to be borne by somebody, and usually it's the purchaser, and then that makes the house less affordable. So then how do you deal with affordable housing? So this is it's not just a simplified process as for you to build more sustainable homes. Those that can afford unique one-off houses will build that in, but at great cost. So it's a bit of a balancing exercise.
Okay, thanks for I may come back to you on that, but I think Paul wants to say something. So I let Paul.
Yeah, I mean that's a very interesting response, obviously. But just as Steve made clear and Izzy made clear, what you're saying is that you as a developer can't afford to build these houses to a higher environmental standard. Therefore, you're going to pass the cost onto a future owner to have to retrofit it in 5-10 years time because it's completely inadequate. So I think really, I think that's disingenuous to say that you as a developer can't afford it, whereas you're expecting a future owner to have to be able to afford to retrofit it.
I think the difference is, and this is what we're seeing with technology change. So even, whether you look at solar panels or any other form of change in technology, the cost does reduce down over time. The proposals meet and exceed building regulations, and that's the regulation the government sets at this point in time to say all homes must meet this. To exceed that does more than is expected. As the technologies move on and the costs change, people will make different choices as they move through their home ownership, and that's not unusual. I mean, we probably all find ourselves in that position. I'm about to transition from an oil boiler to an air source heat pump, but I'm doing that because the oil boiler was put in at the time, because that's what met building regs at the time. So there is a balancing exercise. We are doing an awful lot more with the environmental side, i.e. the ecology in that side, than is necessary.
Thanks. I mean, I think the issue that certainly I've got is that I think, as was raised earlier, is everyone's declared a climate emergency with goals for carbon reduction, with goals for carbon neutrality in the not too distant future, and this development as it stands is going to produce an awful lot of carbon, which someone's got to pay for, and at the end of the day, it looks as though it's the sort of local councils or the homeowners are going to pay for it, and they're the ones with the least amount of money. If you look at the profits that the home builders have been making over the last 5 years, you sort of think, well, you're making all the money. You should be future-proofing these things.
As I say, I can't comment on the.
No, sure. I don't want to get.
I'm a consultant. I'm not. What I would say, and again, having looked at it, and there's been quite a lot of criticism of why build at Frome. When you look at Frome and you look at travel patterns, building at Frome will probably have one of the biggest impacts, like positive impacts, by not having as many people in cars. So 20% of carbon emissions come from car travel. So by building at your larger settlements, you typically give more opportunity to either walk, cycle, or e-bike now, which is quite popular, or to use the bus, or to work and live in Frome. And we're seeing more and more of that. We're also seeing a shift in the way people travel for work, the amount of times, we all travel into our offices if you work in an office, and how much more we work from home. Actually, there are different ways to address the climate agenda. It's not just a one-size-fits-all. There is more to it than simply fabric or simply, in my view, bolt-ons. Because the bolt-ons don't create the out-and-out sustainability. It's the fabric of the building that does it.
Okay,
it does most.
On that one. John, did you want to jump in?
No, I think this has gone on long enough. I had a technical question. Homeowners won't be forced to retrofit. They would retrofit by necessity over time. So it's not an automatic that suddenly homeowners are going to have to retrofit the houses when they buy them because of whatever's happening. So I think that was the only point. Is that true? They're not going to be forced to retrofit their houses, although otherwise we should be obligating them to put in hydrogen boilers now, even though there's no hydrogen supply.
That's right. They won't be forced to retrofit. As we know at the minute with the government grant system, there is a grant, £10,000 grant for people to change to other forms of energy and heat generation. So I understand that scheme is, whilst that scheme itself will finish, others will probably continue.
Okay. Thanks very much for that, Colin.
Steve.
Jane. Oh, hang on.
Thank you. Sorry, just a couple of questions. I just want to ask Colin, I didn't quite follow what you were saying about Highways England. Is it correct that there is going to be a 3-month pause in order for further work needed to be carried out, or has that work already been carried out and they're considering it?
So the work has been underway. So we've had the first part of the pause, if you like. They will not lift their, what they call a holding letter. It's not a direction, just a letter. They won't lift their holding letter until such time as they're satisfied. So we believe we've now got the basis of a, should we say, a Froome-wide solution, of which we will need to play our part in that Froome-wide solution, but they will need to discuss it and agree it first before we do anything.
Okay, thank you.
Does that explain it?
Yes, thank you. And likewise with Natural England, I think their comments were along the lines of they felt that the proposals as currently submitted would have a detrimental impact on the ecology. And again, I wasn't quite clear what was happening in response to that.
I think two things have happened with Natural England. I don't think they've actually read the ecology master plan, because they seem to suggest one doesn't exist when there's as I say, that was part of the letter circulated. There's a substantial landscape ecology master plan. So that addresses one of their points, which we're asking them to confirm that they have seen it. The second part was in relation to the Little Keyford site, which is in outline. So their concern, if you like, is planning permission gets granted. How can you assure your dark corridors are going to be dark, and how do you prove that? Well, what the issue you have with an outline is you don't know the exact position of every house, because that's why I've applied in outline. So it's a slightly unusual objection to have. I've never seen it before. What we're intending to do is go back to Natural England and say, yep, absolutely, we stand by our position. We'll accept a planning condition which expects us to meet your requirements of a specific lux level within a specific distance of the hedgerows. Now we believe we can meet that because we've done all the work on the other side. I did slightly wonder again whether they were getting confused and were perhaps not necessarily talking about these two applications, and might have been talking about the Wayne site to the north, but I don't know the answer to that.
I suppose that kind of begs the question, why is it an outline application when the other is a full?
Principally because it's generally good practice. You go to, so the mount side will be typically developed first. So what you do is you go through your development process, and actually as you're going through that, you pick up any issues that might have arisen through consultation, and then you can build those into the second scheme. And this comes back to every scheme, by natural process, should always get better than the last scheme. So that's why it's in outline. It's to enable us to go back then and have a look at that in more detail, come back to you all, talk about it, and take that one another step further, perhaps.
Okay. So if the other one was in outline and not full, well, sorry, that's probably a bit of a sarcastic response.
No, go on.
Well, you know, if that's the reason for that one being submitted in outline, why is the other one not in outline?
That's the one that will be developed first.
Okay, fair enough.
The mount will be developed first, or would be developed first. And if you look at the highway solution and the way it's set out, the highway solution is for the mount first, and then moves on to Little Keyford, reserve matter on Little Keyford, build out Little Keyford. So it works from right to left,
Okay.
east to west.
Fair enough. Just one last question. The location of the play areas. I think we mentioned this in our original response. We felt they were actually not in the best location, given, you know, at the bottom of the site, no natural surveillance, actually quite complicated to get through the site as well. So I just wondered what the reasoning behind them being in that position was.
Well, can I turn it around slightly? The play areas are within the isochrones that you would expect from the Fields in Trust standard, and they meet all of those requirements for walking distances. As a relatively young parent, walking and exercising, getting your kids to and from a play area through what should be a nice green corridor can act as quite a nice part of the whole play experience. So, and being on the edge of a development, I think that's, you know, typically if you put a play area in the centre of development, you can end up with those people who live closest to it having issues because children are noisy. So, you know, and in reality, we should welcome that, but not everybody does welcome that. So there is a little bit of rhyme and reason to do that. It's not like they're stuck out on a corner. You know, they've got a really nice route to them, and that route runs all the way up through the centre of the site. And in addition to that, it's trying to create and put them into quite a natural environment, because that's where all the ecology features are. And again, it's about teaching your kids, you know, if you're in an ecology area and trying to get them to engage with wildlife. And so, as I say, it's a slightly different view to how you should use your play areas.
Okay, thank you. That was all my questions.
Thanks, Jane. Mark, did you have something you wanted to raise? No? Okay. Hannah has.
Helen Kay has put a question in the chat. Will Frome residents be consulted on the traffic and transport plans that the developers have put together?
So say that again, I missed that slightly.
Sorry. Will Frome residents be consulted on the traffic and transport plans that the developers have put together?
So the proposals related to the direct access into this site and the immediate environs are obviously consulted as part of this application. The wider proposals, so this is in relation to, I'm assuming the Highways England element. It's not, because it's Highways England and Somerset County roads, it won't be for us to make changes to those. So we will probably be contributing into a scheme which others will contribute into, and it'll be administered, I suspect, I suspect the scheme will be administered by Mendip in association with Somerset. So it will be then into a public, obviously a public body, and the public body would deal with it.
Okay. Okay, thanks very much, Colin. Any other questions? Any other comments? Great. Thanks for your time, Colin. Thanks for answering numerous questions.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for coming along. We really do appreciate when developers, agents, whatever, you know, do come and talk to us. We get a much better feeling for what's going on. So we thank you, and as I say, thanks for your answers, and thanks for being here. And I'm sure we'll be talking again at some stage.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. And I'll mute. Do I stay on for the next bit? Can I stay on for?
Yeah, you can stay on as an attendee for as long as you like.
Right. I'll stay on for a little bit. I'll switch I'll switch myself out.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Okay. So, any thoughts? Any instructions on where we go from here, Rich?
Okay, I'll just say I think access. I think Martin summed this up. That access is still an issue, and I think it probably needs a bit more work. I don't know if you can ever really resolve it. take the point, you know, that it's been allocated development land. There are going to be houses there. I don't personally know how you would solve it, but it does appear from what Anne said and Martin said that, you know, there are some issues there. So, and part of the Mount site to the northeast there seems like a logical link to me to put a little footpath through there. Maybe it just doesn't quite the crossing across the B road. Yeah, it'd be nice to have a zebra, you know, something with flashing lights that would slow down traffic so you could cross safely. Seems to me it's not quite 100% gelled. I'm not convinced either by master plan necessarily. It seems still we've got 3 different sets of plans. One's going ahead with full planning now, one's outline, and one, well, I don't know where they are. So it still feels a bit separate. I do think it's better than it was. I get that. It's a shame about the energy standards and all the rest of it, but I understand that it's just standards as they exist now. But it would be nice to see something a bit braver, perhaps, or a bit more modern. But I think the 2 key issues really are the access, really, still, and this master plan. I'm not convinced that is it a master plan? You know, should we have a more comprehensive environment impact assessment? It doesn't quite feel right to me. But those are my 2 main points, really.
Hey, thanks for that, Rich. Anyone else got anything to add, John?
I like the concept of doing a comprehensive environmental impact assessment because before they did it 1 by 1, now they're doing it 2 by 2. Well, why don't we just push it all the way and get them to do it as a gang, because it makes sense. It's a much more integrated way of doing things. It's all this piecemeal stuff, and of course it's in the interest of developers to do that because it's difficult, it's complicated because there's so many individuals involved. But I do think a comprehensive environmental impact assessment of this massive thing going across that way would be, you know, good, even though it doesn't quite meet the statutory numbers maybe required. I don't know that detail. But apart from that, what I would say is when they first presented this scheme, you know, they have changed lots of things in response to comments. So I think we should acknowledge that. I think that means they could respond further in the future.
Thanks, John. Anybody else? Paul?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, John's right. You know, it has improved, but in my opinion, and I kind of get a sense from many people, it's still got a long way to go before it's really acceptable. You know, the layout is still far too 20th century. The design of the houses is still far too. I mean, basically, we're still stuck in the 20th century, and I think Colin's response really to our questions suggests that developers aren't really prepared to come into the 21st century until they're dragged by legislation. They're not going to do it on their own. They have to be forced to do it by legislation, and unfortunately, our government is dragging its heels and is not very good at doing that. So we're kind of stuck in an impasse, really. But I you know, given that, I think it's perfectly reasonable for us as a town, as a community, to expect more really from these developers. You know, they may be reluctant because they're not being forced to do it, but we'd like to see more, really. And so I don't see really, there's a few things, as people have said, there are a few things to support, but overall, I couldn't possibly support this application at the moment.
Thanks, Paul. Anne?
Well, to argue that it can't all be in the structure of the building to answer climate change, and then to say it has to be in things like public transport and cycling and walking, and then not to explain how people are going to walk or cycle to the sites. It might be able to talk about how you walk and cycle between 2 of the sites. And not to talk about how public transport can gain access to the sites and how it might be on bus routes and so on. So doesn't answer it with the structure of the buildings themselves, and certainly doesn't answer it in access to the sites. So yeah, access is a real issue. The structure of the buildings is a real issue. The layout of the site is still a real issue. So I don't actually think how we've moved forward, apart from one access to one of the 3 sites being off the B3092 rather than off Little Keyford Lane. And I welcome that. But the other one that's just north of it, also needs to be off the B3092. So access it's not a master plan. We have no master plan.
Thanks, Jane. Anybody else? No, great. I think we've got quite a few things there to. Oh, hang on, Jane wants to say something. Sorry.
Oh, so I was just going to ask if you wanted me to summarise what I think our response might be based on discussion and what I've heard, sort of in bullet point form rather than maybe a 2-page letter at this point in time.
Yes, in a word. What I was going to suggest is, why don't you do what you've just said you're going to do, and then you can put together an actual response which you can send to us, and we can send off to mend it tomorrow, because otherwise we could be here for some time yet, and we've already sort of gone an hour and a half. So yeah, great, Jane. If you could summarise in bullet point what you think, where we are, and then we can form a statement around that.
Okay, thank you. So firstly, acknowledge and appreciate the changes that have already been made. We still see the appreciating it isn't part of the 2 David Wilson applications, but this is supposed to be a master plan site, so access is still considered to be an issue, particularly off of Little Keyford Lane, and there are still some concerns about the connections through the site, notably the path that Anne was referring to, and also the fact that there is no seemingly safe route up to the mount because there's no footpath. Concerned about the crossing and whether or not that is actually safe. And as I've already said, I think one of the key things is, we still don't consider that this is a master planned approach, or not well enough, not master plan well enough at this stage. And actually what we feel would make that better would be to see some the surveys, so traffic impact assessment and the environmental assessments actually done for the site as a whole and not individual sites. We would like to see better sustainability measures based on what we discussed. We also still have some concerns about the layout and design, and this is perhaps my suggestion that hasn't actually already been said, but I think seemingly there is going to be some time still to have discussions with developers, both Wayne Homes and David Wilson, and we'd like to take the opportunity, as part of that pause, if you like, to perhaps sit down and have some more detailed discussions around the issues that I've just listed, but not just ourselves. I think if it were possible, I'm sure that folk would like to be included in that, and perhaps our district councillors as well, because I know they've got a keen interest in this site, and so, as I say, that's the basis or a bullet point or list of what I think we've discussed.
Great, thanks for that, Jane. Everyone in agreement with that? Great. So, if it's okay, we'll put a statement, or Jane and I will put a statement, probably together with Paul as well, and as our formal response back to Mendip District Council on this one, on these, should I say?
Okay. Should we actually vote on that?
Yeah. So effectively voting to delegate authority to the 3 of us, if that's okay. Proposed by Anne, second by John. All those in favour? Thank you.
And that's unanimous. Thank you.
Right. And we'll get that off hopefully tomorrow.
Or maybe Monday.
Monday. All right, Jane, Monday. I think we should. Well, Jane, what other ones do you think we should be talking about tonight? I think Cherry Grove we should certainly discuss.
Absolutely, yes. There weren't. I think there were a couple of the tree applications. One where we felt that. Which one is that? Sorry, just bear with me.
I think Cherry Grove, number 485, the 119 Broadway. I think we should.
Yeah, definitely that one. I mean, so just for the purposes of those who are attendees or might be watching the stream, you know, councillors have looked at all the plans in advance of the meeting, because it is quite clunky to share plans through Zoom. It's not impossible. So councillors have looked at all the plans in advance, and if they have any concerns with any of the particular applications, they will have highlighted them to both myself and Steve prior to the meeting, which is how we sort of judge which ones we need to formally discuss at the meeting. And absolutely, Cherry Grove was one that we raised concern with, but I think really that was the only other one where we had any major concerns.
Okay.
Sorry, just bear with me, because when I share my screen, I have to unplug my second screen, and then I lose my notes.
Jane,
Okay,
before you start, can I just, Helen Kay has asked if we're discussing Wayne Holmes' application today.
I mean, I think, sorry, I perhaps should have clarified that. The comments that we just agreed on covered all three applications, because we were looking at them as part of a master plan approach. So I think whilst we may not have pointed out any of the issues specifically relevant to that site, the main ones in terms of access and the transport assessment and the environmental impact assessment, design and layout actually all apply to that site as well.
Yeah, thanks, Jane.
Okay, so this is number 278 on our list and is land at Cherry Grove, Frome. The applicants are Somerset County Council. The application is for the erection of 9 assisted living units of accommodation, and that includes staff accommodation in association with the existing assisted living unit, which is called Cherry Trees on the site. Councillors will recall that there are actually two, or have been two applications. So there is the adjoining site, which is for market and some affordable housing, I think perhaps 24 units, but we're only looking at the assisted living application for this, and in particular the revised plans that have been submitted. Previously we objected to the application, and we stated that whilst we fully understand the need for additional assisted living accommodation, we cannot support this application because for the following reasons. So firstly, the land forms part of the Marston Trading Estate, and at the beginning of the local plan part 2 process, this site was included within the boundary of the protected employment land for the trading estate. It's not clear why this has subsequently been removed. There's been no marketing of the site in line with Mendip's marketing and business evidence SPD, supplementary planning document, to support the loss of an existing employment site. We're aware that the adjoining business has an interest in this site to expand their business. The noise impact assessment, that was our original comments, and there has been some discussion between the case officer and the agents about the noise impact assessment that was submitted, and the agents are saying that the noise impact assessment now is not has been updated so that all of the habitable rooms in the assisted living units will have openable windows, except one, with the exception of one, which is plot 10. And as part of that exchange, they've talked about some comments from the environmental health officer, but I can't find those comments. So it's not clear to me whether or not at this point in time, environmental health or environmental protection, I think it is now, whether or not they are satisfied with the outcome of the revised noise impact assessment, whereas previously they weren't, and they said, you know, it wasn't sufficient. But other than that, very little has changed with the application, and I don't believe that it has dealt with any of our previous objections, but there is some uncertainty about the noise impact assessment.
Thanks, Jane. Anyone got any comments before I? No. Rich.
So, so what has technically changed from last time? Just the windows aspect and supposedly the noise assessment. Is that basically, didn't seem like much change to me, but so that's it. Okay.
It's a shame we can't see the environmental health officer's report, because that really is the sort of one of the big cruxes of this whole application, isn't it? Is that previously the only way that the noise level within the units was acceptable of a night was if all of the windows were closed, which is not that feasible in the summer months. And I think we looked at this before before we knew anything about COVID, and in a post-COVID environment where you have the NHS and Public Health England suggesting that ventilation is one of the key things in preventing the spread of viruses such as COVID, it seems really strange to me that we, unless there is marked difference from the environmental health officer as to what's changed, are we expecting people to live in shut up boxes still? It doesn't correlate with me at the moment, I have to admit.
I mean, there is a ventilation system within the buildings, some trickle ventilation, but even so, you know, it's not just about the fresh air, you know.
No,
it's about the comfort of being
absolutely, yeah, living
in those rooms. Depending, you know, when it's hot, people naturally want to open their windows, not necessarily just for fresh air, but you know, it's but that aside, you know, I don't think it hasn't dealt with any of our previous objections.
No, absolutely. Thanks, Jane. Paul?
I mean, just referring back to one of the previous objections, one of them I think was about loss of employment space or potential employment space. I think that hasn't been addressed either in this,
no.
In this new. I didn't think it had. Thanks.
It seems to me as we reiterate our previous objections and state that, you know, it would be good to see the new environmental health officer's report. It's difficult for us to say any more than that, is it? Really, at this junction. Rich?
I tend to agree with that. I mean, it's assisted living. My mum's just moved into a sort of assisted flat. It's great. She's got everything she needs. It's nice, quiet. She's got access outside, and she pays rent for that. Luckily, she can do that. But you know, I'm quite happy to see her in there. It's a decent place. I guess the key question is, would we be happy to see somebody that we know, our loved ones or relatives, living in there? And if the answer is no, then we should say That's good enough.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks. Totally agree. Lizzie, did you have your hand up?
Just because we're on an energy efficiency watch this evening, and I remember this one from previously as being one of those where you just slap your forehead and wonder what's going on, especially given that the applicant is Somerset County Council.
Mm.
Come on. Come on. I don't know how you minute that, Hannah, I'm sorry, but frustration. Councils expressed frustration that Somerset County Council had not reflected their own declaration of climate emergency in their application to build something in their own county. There you go.
Yes, thanks, Lizzie.
I think what you said first was better.
Yeah.
Just not sure how to spell it. We can send voice messages to.
I'm not sure we can put emojis in our official response. I'm sure at some stage we will be able to. But I know we can at the moment. But, yeah, it does strike me that the whole climate emergency, I think Paul raised this at a meeting not so long ago, is you know, I hate to say it, it's almost just lip service with some of these people at the moment. And I think, yeah, we should be pushing back on these things quite strongly if we feel that they're not. You know, they're not future-proofed, and this is a classic one, as Lizzie said, with the applicant being Somerset County Council. You'd think they would at least make a bit of an effort. But so I think our previous objections still stand, and a note that we can't actually see the Environmental Health Officer's new report. Can't think of anything else much more to say than that, unless anyone else has got any thoughts. No? Great. Should we vote on that then? Someone propose that? So I'm taking. Thanks, Rich. Mark, second. All those in favour? Great. Sorry,
Yes,
Jane.
thank you. So I was waiting for John to reappear.
Thanks, John.
Thank you. Okay, so were there any others that councillors specifically wanted to discuss? And there were some comments about preferences on some of the applications, but no actual or specific objections, I don't think. Oh, yes, there was actually. Yeah, no, sorry, I know which one it is. It is 100. No.
493 was.
493. I've got so many on my list.
73
Wyville
Road. Yeah.
So
excited about the bar, didn't you, Jane, on this one?
Yes, so 73 Wyville Road. So this is for the erection of a single-storey side extension below an existing first floor extension. I have previously spoken to the applicants on this, but I can see why the plans are very confusing, because essentially previously there had been built a first floor extension, which essentially stood on, call them stilts, piers, whatever you want to call them, with an open space underneath. And what the new owners would like to do is effectively to fill in the piers, but so that they also have a ground floor living area. But what's happened, I think, is when they've put in the plans to show the existing, they haven't shown the first floor extension that is already there. And so I think that's why the plans were very existing. But yes, there were quite a lot of photos of a bar, which I presume is what they want to use it for, which perhaps weren't a necessary part of the planning application. But yeah, I mean, yes.
Okay, thanks, Jane. Paul.
But yeah, I mean, to be honest, the the applicant has obviously been a bit confused in this application, but I just don't understand why it's even been validated, because it just seems to be not make any sense at all. I mean, the application is for the erection of a single-story side extension below an existing first floor extension. Therefore, I'd expect to see a drawing on here that says ground floor plan. But there isn't one. So, I've just realized actually right at the bottom, there's a thing that says space plan, which kind of vaguely shows a ground floor plan, but it doesn't show it in relation to anything else. So it shouldn't never be in the planning system as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, I don't know what we should do about that. I mean, I'm not sure that we'd necessarily object to it, but it just doesn't make any sense.
Leave Jane to respond to that. You going to respond to that, Jane? No, not really.
Yeah, I mean,
We'll go on to Rich then.
I was just going to say the same, really. That what Paul's just said, it's very confusing, hard to understand. Don't object to it in principle. I'm sure it'll be a really sensible thing to do, sounds like, but it's actually, you can't make a decision on it because you can't really understand it. So it seems that they need to just go back with their drawings and improve the quality of the drawings and add in a bit more information. We'd all probably be happy then.
Yeah, there was 2 or 3 this month, weren't there, Jane, where the plans were really quite confusing. It's
yeah, and Paul's absolutely right. I mean, so quite a few of them probably shouldn't have been registered, and that, I mean, that's certainly an issue that I can take up separately with the with the managers, rather than directly respond to that as part of the application response. It possibly won't get picked up on by the people that it should be. So that's something that I can take up directly.
Okay. Yeah, if you could, I think we should. Yeah, some were really confusing.
There is one other that I have flagged as potentially having a significant impact on the neighbouring property, which is number 483 on our list, and that is 6 Beechwood Close, Frome.
We've seen this before, haven't we?
We have seen it before, yeah. It's for the erection, or the description is for the erection of a 2-storey extension on the rear elevation. And I've made reference to the comments from the that have been posted online on Mendit's website. It does appear that they because of the placement of the roof, that actually that will, because it comes out so far, will impact on the amenity of the neighbouring property. So this is not about a right to review or anything like that. There needs to be, I think, when the case officer goes on site, if in fact they are still carrying out site visits, it should become apparent quite how much that impact will be. I mean, it is difficult not having been and visited the site to make that assessment, but on paper it certainly does look like that there will be an impact on the amenity, from my view at least.
Which is pretty much what we said last time, if my memory serves me right.
It was, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, reiterate what we said before.
If everybody's happy with that as a response.
Yeah. Do we need to vote on that? We probably do. Someone propose that. I'll propose it. Someone second. Thanks, Lizzie.
And so that's a majority, as Paul has declared an interest on that application.
Using the same, Steve, using the same criteria, should we look at 485 at 119 Broadway? That's one we've seen before as well, which has a bit of an overlooking part to it. And it'd be interesting to see how this revised plan has addressed that.
Yep, definitely. And I think this is one where the civic society objected as well.
Yeah.
My memory serves me right.
So this is number 485 on our list, 119 Broadway. The demolition of the rear part of the dwelling and replace with a 1 and 2 story extension. And as you rightly say, this is a resubmission. I think I'm just going to say Paul's comments if that's okay with Paul, or unless Paul would like to. So actually no objection in principle, but as you know, because the planning permission already exists, but this application updates it. An improvement on the existing, but would rather see something which is a bit more distinctive from the existing. And also note that the stone window surrounds on the south elevation of the original cottage appear to be missing from the proposed elevation. And hopefully that's a mistake on the drawing. And the Civic Society, if you just bear with me. The Civic Society have said that they object. So whilst the resubmitted design does reduce the bulk and size of the new building compared with the proposal already granted, it introduces elements that are out of character with the house, which is designated as a positive building, and the conservation area. Notably, the proposed slack pitch double gabled extension has a suburban appearance at odds with the cottage vernacular of the dwelling. The rear elevation is visible from the public domain and merits a more sympathetic design.
Okay. What did we say last time, Jane? Can we?
Do you know, I can't remember and I haven't noted it. I will find it if you just bear with me.
It is a big extension, isn't it? I mean, not that should.
So previously, we said, that's helpful. Our comments have not been loaded onto Mendip's website.
No. When was it? I might be able to find our minutes.
I will check on our spreadsheet. So that might take me a little while, so please do.
So there was, I'm just looking at Google Maps because I need pictures to remind me, because it's on the kind of, you go up Broadway and there's the junction with Eggford Lane and there's a sort of switchback which goes into a lane out the back, and we were concerned about the people who face towards the back of the house and whether it would just be too much stonework or something for them. And I don't know if there was a tree application that went with it as well.
There was, yeah.
The two confused. Yeah.
Yeah, the people from Lansdowne Terrace will look straight onto it.
So I guess that's the Civic Society point about people being able to see the rear of the property and it looking suburban rather than appropriate.
Yeah, I have it now, where you said that we had no objection, but we note the objections from the neighbouring properties and would ask that the issue of overlooking is assessed on site.
Okay. So probably as well as, I think Paul's comments perfectly, sums it up for me. Plus, I think we should question the overlooking issue.
Yeah, I was just going to add. I've just noticed that I hadn't noticed this before. There are objections, presumably from neighbours, on this current application as well, presumably for the same overlooking issues. I hadn't read them in detail, but
I don't think they were there yesterday.
Oh,
possibly.
okay.
Yeah.
Right there, just recent.
So,
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay, so are you happy for me to use Paul's comments and add in our note about our concerns about the overlooking as we did previously?
yep.
Okay.
Should we vote on that?
Yes, please.
Someone propose it, please. Thanks, Paul. Someone second. Thanks, Mark.
And that's unanimous. Thank you.
John's had to go. His shoulder is playing up.
Yeah. So if there aren't any others that like to raise for discussion, are you happy for me to send the comments in line with the notes that have been sent through?
Yep. Great. Someone propose that, please. Thanks, Rich. Someone second. Thanks, Mark.
And that's unanimous. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks very much, everybody. Where's Hannah gone? Have you stopped recording, Hannah?
Not yet. You haven't given the date of the next meeting.
Oh no, I just haven't got the little recording thing on the top of my screen. That's all. No, date of next meeting. I've got. What have you got? The date of the next meeting? I've got so much paper here.
Yeah, the 11th of March.
Right. Thank you. Thanks very much, everybody. So the next meeting will be on the 11th of March, and look forward to seeing.